interested to get your opinion on this, Michael. I've been saying, I've been criticizing Bernie's tactics and strategy, and people have conflated that with me criticizing Bernie. So, which is fucking annoying, especially people who know better. Uh, um, you know, so would you agree with my assessment that Bernie's campaign has been schizophrenic at best by saying at rallies, I'm going to run against the Democratic establishment, and then he does a DNC video talking about unity before one vote is ever cast in a primary, talking about how we all have to come together to beat Trump and billionaires, and he's got 2 billionaires in the goddamn unity video with him. We're supposed to come together with billionaires? They're the problem, Bernie. Joe Biden is the problem. You're not supposed to be coming together with Joe Biden and fucking Bloomberg to fight anything. You're supposed to be fighting them. And so when he comes out and then he just does this thing too, where he does and repeats mad out talking points about foreign policy and impeachment, it gets him nothing, in my opinion, and it doesn't take a genius. That's why the whole point is it gets him nothing. Not one goddamn vote does it get him to do those things. So what would be your assessment?
Right, because if you're a Maddow voter, you have another candidate anyway.
Yes.
It's not as though you're going to be entertaining the prospect of voting for Bernie, right?
Yes.
You're probably mad that Bernie, is perceived to have mistreated Hillary in 2016, even though that wasn't really true. So, what are you gaining? How are you broadening your coalition by doing this? I don't know. I understand the frustration in trying to differentiate between a criticism of Bernie's tactics and of Bernie himself, because like you, I broadly support the Bernie political program, but I think it does raise some red flags when he appears to be consistently giving in to the temptations of just becoming another member of the Democratic coalition and just singing from the same hymn book as them, because people don't like that hymn book. People want something new. That's why Bernie had such a novelty and was so refreshing to so many when he first ran, because he was presenting something different. So the more and more he becomes the same, the less and less that appeal has any resonance. So it's sort of ironic because Tulsi is now left with almost giving voice to those frustrated Bernie supporters who are just like, no, reject this, stand up and actually say the truth. So at every one of Tulsi's events, she always talks about the new Cold War and nuclear arms race. And part of that new Cold War is the insanity that has engrossed the entire American political system by way of Russiagate, such that now the knee-jerk position by both Republicans and Democrats is to demand further hawkish antagonism toward Russia. And she's the only one giving a countervailing view. Whereas I haven't heard anything from Bernie on that subject. In fact, he always just gives credence to whatever the Democratic Party talking points on the subject are. And in fact, he sort of gives left or progressive credence to those talking points, which is even more destructive because he has credibility amongst people who might kind of on an instinctual level be skeptical of aspects of the Russiagate or impeachment narrative. But when they hear Bernie enunciating they think to themselves, oh, I guess there's some validity here. Whereas all you have is really Tulsi saying something different. And just yesterday, somebody asked her a question at an event she did in this small town, Jaffrey, New Hampshire. And they said, I'm really concerned about the superdelegates potentially thwarting the will of the voters. And I haven't heard Bernie really talking much about that potentiality recently, but Tulsi said, this is why we have to totally reform the Democratic Party. We can't just play nice. We can't just pretend that everybody is unified in terms of how the Democratic Party is structured and how it's behaved in the past and could behave in the future. No, we have to be sort of clear-eyed about the corrupt influences of the party. I'm just sort of paraphrasing and summarizing what she said. I have the quote somewhere, but that's the gist of it. And, she actually gave an anecdote about how in 2016, after Bernie started really raising a lot of money through small dollar donations, Tulsi recalled being on the floor of the House with a colleague. And the colleagues and Tulsi recounted how she was excited by Bernie's success in the small dollar fundraising because he had been outpacing Hillary, and it seemed like a groundbreaking model for galvanizing political support. And Tulsi expressed that to one of her colleagues, and the colleague was like, "No, you don't understand. This is a threat to us." And by us, the colleague meant moneyed incumbents who rely on the backing of corporate lobbyists and PAC dollars and such. And Tulsi said that that was an eye-opening moment for her because it showed her how entrenched those interests are. And I think that's sort of how she ended up on the trajectory that she is now, where she's saying, okay, look, it's sort of incumbent on me to try to put forward this message which is demanding a full-scale departure from business as usual in the party, whereas Bernie, for his own specific political reasons, is having to play nice with the party and to pretend that there aren't major schisms within it that could really doom the prospects potentially of the ultimate nominee. You see that in the way that they were so panicked about approaching looking like that they were going to go after Elizabeth Warren after she launched one of the sleaziest political hit jobs in recent memory, because they don't want to disrupt this idea that there is a unified progressive front in the party, which is like, I think Liz is the one who sort of disrupted that notion when she colluded with the corporate media to drop the equivalent of a thermonuclear bomb on Bernie's campaign and accuse him of sexism based on basic, gossip. And yet, that was always a fantasy.
And Bernie's response to that is tepid at best, right?
Yeah, tepid at best. I mean, they don't want to. They say that they don't want to continue the feud, right? They want to focus on issues. Well, I mean, one of the leading so-called progressive candidate who I was told for years was Bernie's chief ally, right, and she had to be treated with kid gloves, and everybody had to appreciate her contributions. It's an issue if that person decides 3 weeks before the Iowa caucus to launch this orchestrated smear job in conjunction with CNN that makes out Bernie essentially to be a misogynist, and she's using that now as a Hillary style tactic, when in fact Hillary never resorted to such sleazy tactics as that, because what Warren did was she revealed what was ostensibly a private conversation. So at least when Hillary attacked Bernie, it was about somewhat the issues. Now, it was a distortion of the issues for the most part, but it was more or less about the issues. This was a personal attack by Warren, which involved her divulging private communications. So it's really worse than anything Hillary ever did.
Correct.
So if you want to talk about how we need a progressive front, and you want to do that by obscuring what machinations Warren really pulled here, then I don't really trust that you're operating in totally good faith, or at least you're not being honest about what's transpired.
You're talking about Bernie's campaign, that they're not being...
Bernie's campaign to some extent. You also have these progressive groups who kind of, have been wringing their hands and saying, "Oh God, please, everybody, let's get along. All the progressives need to come together."
That is such a bullshit take, Michael. That is such a bullshit take. Can't we all get along? Fuck you. That is not what primaries are. That is not what Elizabeth Warren just did. And right now, if Bernie's campaign could had a fucking brain cell working, they would fucking go nuclear on her and end it, and make anybody else afraid to do this to him again. But they're never going to do that, because what I wanted to bring up to you was the week after Bernie did a unity video with 2 billionaires and Joe fucking Biden. He does a unity video with 2 billionaires and Joe fucking Biden, which totally muddies his message. A week later, AOC comes out and says, "I'm fucking the party. I'm not going to be fundraising for the DCCC. I'm setting up my own fucking fundraising thing, and the DCCC can go fuck themselves because they're working against us," which is exactly what Bernie should have said to the DNC.
Right. The DCCC are the ones who presided over the recruitment of candidates for the 2018 midterms, right? And who did we get as a result of those DCCC efforts? former CIA officials, former, and these just sort of careerist former prosecutors,
right,
who appeal to certain suburban districts, but are really out for their own self-interest. They're not going to press for any kind of quote unquote progressive change. They're just going to do the bare minimum. And that's because they were embraced by the party apparatus, and that's what the party apparatus is comfortable with. And that's not the type of individual who's going to get on board with a far-reaching Bernie-style reform agenda, right? So it's almost self-defeating in a way for Bernie to just have this conciliatory posture and say that, we're all Democrats at the end of the day, and even if you're Tom Steyer or
crazy.
Michael Bloomberg, I'll appear in a video with
fucking
you.
Crazy.
It's just like, really? I mean, fast forward to like 4 years ago, does anybody in their right mind think that they would – okay, can anybody really envision, if you just try to transplant yourself to 4 years ago, Bernie appearing in a Unity video with Michael Bloomberg? Does that seem in keeping with his broader political –
you mean a billion with his message and his identity or his political brand? You mean to be seen in a Unity video with a billionaire who instituted racist stop and frisk? You mean, does that muddy his message? Yes, it does, 1,000%. And anybody who doesn't know that is fucking lying to themselves. And if you want to attack me for pointing out shit strategy by his campaign, then go ahead, because I can't stop saying it, because it's obvious. It's obvious to you. It's obvious to me. It doesn't get him one goddamn vote. And, the people inside his campaign, I'm sure most of them are nice people, but there's splits in every campaign. And I'm sure there's a split inside. Well, I've been told there is. And, for instance, his campaign, Faz comes from, why can't
Center for American Progress.
Not only that, but he comes from Harry Reid. Right? Didn't Foz work for Harry Reid? And if you ever got fucking disgusted with Harry Reid's capitulation, now you're seeing it happen again inside the Bernie Sanders campaign. So this is what I'm...
Even these progressive operators have career interests in mind that they have to preserve.
That's correct!
And calling for a unified, quote-unquote, progressive front is how they ensure future job opportunities for themselves. So that's the key thing to remember when you have these guys, pleading for unity. It's like unity for me because I need to get a job later on.
Right.
And if you're seen to be somebody who is a divider or somebody who's provoking discord within the so-called progressive faction of the Democratic Party, it's going to be harder for you to find employment later on. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. Meanwhile, you have Tulsi, for example, putting out fundraising emails skewering Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer for trying to buy the election with their billionaire largesse, and going after Mayor Pete and saying he's basically a puppet of the military-industrial complex who's backed by CIA spooks of every sort. And
that's the campaign Bernie should be running.
Right, but Bernie, for one reason or another, he can't be compelled into actually letting loose on some of these clowns on occasion. Now, in fairness, he did put out a pretty good statement recently on Biden, obfuscating his position on the Iraq War, and which is doubly relevant now because the 2002 authorization for use of military force that Biden, of course, voted in favor of is being cited presently by the Trump administration as a legal justification for waging war on Iran. So that is a valid issue to bring up, and there was a decent statement that Bernie did put out on it. But you got to go a little further. I mean, you have to sort of really hammer it home to people why, if you're voting for one of these other flavors of establishment Democrat, you're just going to get more of the same, irrespective of whatever rhetorical flourishes they're employing now to make it seem like they're these trailblazing reformers, which we all know that they're not. Look at who they're backed by financially. Look at who's endorsing them. It's all these Obama, Hillary holdovers who just want to perpetuate, especially the status quo in the foreign policy realm. And that's something that is obviously intolerable to Tulsi, which is why she doesn't want the support of those people, the type of spooks and the type of kind of defense contractor sinecure types who are backing Pete and Warren. She doesn't want those people, and she's willing to call them out, call out their corrosive qualities, because it emphasizes and underscores her singularity. And it's just, again, ironic to me that you need Tulsi to be making these points instead of Bernie. But I think it could actually redound to her political advantage, because there is a section of Bernie supporters, and I've met some of them, who do feel a little disenchanted with this, let's all get along approach that he's taken vis-a-vis the Democratic Party over the past couple of years. They want somebody who's a little bit more of a bomb thrower and who doesn't tolerate BS.
Well, Michael, let me ask you this question. So I haven't been to a Bernie rally in a while. The last one I went to was here in Pasadena about 6 or 8 months ago. But do you know if he still starts his campaign speeches by saying it sounds like you're ready for a revolution? Because if he's still saying that he's a revolutionary and then he's making unity videos with billionaires, that seems to be inconsistent at best, and shame on his campaign for having such a schizophrenic message.
I haven't been to any recently. I did go to his Bernie is Back rally in New York with AOC. When was that? In October or so? Mm-hmm. And I think he did call for a political revolution there. So I don't know that I would accuse him of schizophrenia necessarily, but there is a little bit of schizophrenia just in terms of the coherence of the message.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? How is a political revolution consistent with joining arms with Michael Bloomberg, right? I mean, that's just sort of laughable.
That's laughable on its face, and everyone can see through it. So when he does that stuff, it makes him seem like what he's not, which is another politician. It hurts him. It doesn't help him. I'm saying that his campaign strategy is showing Bernie off to the country in a way that will lose him votes, instead of showing him off to the country in a way that will get people off the couch who didn't vote in the last election and vote for him, because that's the biggest voting block, and that's the people Bernie should be focused on, not fucking Hillary voters, not Warren voters, not Biden voters, but the 100 million motherfuckers who wouldn't get off their ass to vote last time, people who voted for Barack Obama twice. Those are the people he's got to be exciting, and you don't excite those people by doing a unity video with 2 billionaires.
Right. And if you go to New Hampshire, you're going to see ads for all the candidates, right? Pretty much. And it strikes me that when you do occasionally see a Tulsi ad, remember, she doesn't have anywhere near as much money as some of the leading candidates, but they have bought ads. And the ads she's choosing to run right now are anti-war ads. And what she's saying is, hey, Trump promised in his rambling, inarticulate way a revamping of the way that the United States conducts its foreign policy, and he's not fulfilled those promises. And that's something that only really you can convey in a plausible way if you're speaking from a standpoint of independence, right? And of not just shrill partisan reflex, right? And the more and more that Bernie sounds like he's just repeating Democratic Party talking points, the more and more that he's going to be, I think, hamstrung from, for example, putting forth a coherent anti-war message. Who knows what's going to happen with Iran, right? Maybe it flares up again. Maybe the state of war that we're now in escalates to a broader conflict, right? And if Bernie can be dismissed as just opposing it because he's against Trump or he wants to help the interests of the Democratic Party, I don't think that the independents and even some of the Trump allied people who maybe would be receptive to a thoroughgoing anti-war message, I don't think that they're going to be drawn to the cause of Bernie in as high numbers of now because of all the concessions that he's made, and it's unfortunate. So that's why, again, I'm sort of struck when I see Tulsi running these anti-war ads in New Hampshire, because she knows that there's an opening there within at least a section of the electorate for somebody who is speaking from a standpoint of principle, not tethered to the interests of any one political party, who can say that I understand that you are disillusioned with how things have turned out, and I can provide an alternative to you that isn't necessarily through the framework of just restoring the Democratic Party to power. And, I don't think Bernie is necessarily deep down hoping to just restore the Democratic Party to power, right? But he's got to now do some calculations in order to secure the nomination that give that impression. And again, it just doesn't garner him many additional votes, to my mind, because the people who just want some sort of singing of Kumbaya among the Democratic Party establishment are going to have other candidates to choose from.
What is the lesson that the Bernie Sanders campaign or any Democrat learns from the Trump victory over Hillary Clinton? What is the lesson that you are there? They're not learning the lesson. The lesson is not only do you run against your opponent, but you run against your own party. Why? Because the political parties are the most unpopular things in the world. They're less popular than fucking Congress. They're less popular than the media. So what they should do is run against, just like Trump did, run against his own party and expose the corruption inside of it. Do you think Trump would for a second put up with a thing called goddamn superdelegates? Do you think for a second he would have put up with that? No, of course he would have. But somehow
he would have called for an armed rebellion.
Yes, and so they would have gotten rid. So Trump puts the fear of God into the Republican Party, whereas Bernie has the fear of the Democratic Party in him all too often. This is just. Again, this is because I'm frustrated, not because I don't want Bernie to win. It's the exact opposite, right? And it's just a shame that Tulsi is running the kind of campaign that if Bernie was running, he would be laying waste to this field, right? But because she gets such negative press and because everybody in her own party is against her, it's hard for her to gain traction. She might next time around, right? I think people in 4 more years, I think people are going to figure out, hey, mate, I don't think she is a Russian. And I think it is a bad idea that we're still in Syria. Even fucking 4 years later, we're still in Syria because we're not getting out of there. Hey, come see a live Jimmy Dore show. We're going to be in Tempe, Arizona, Sacramento, San Jose, Miami. Go to jimmydoorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets to all of our live shows. And go to jimmydoorecomedy.com/join to become a premium member. We give you hours of bonus material every week. Thanks for your support.